What if I told you a doctor discovered how to save thousands of lives, but instead of being celebrated, he was ridiculed, exiled, and eventually you won't believe what the medical community did to him. This is the story of Ignaz Semmelweis, and it's a story we have to remember because it shows how dangerous it is to let dogmatic certainty replace curiosity. Our story begins in Vienna, Austria in the 1840s. In one of Europe's most prestigious hospitals, childbirth had become a death sentence. Mothers were dying in droves from something called childbed fever. Fevers, infections, rapid decline. It was horrifying. There were two maternity wards, one run by doctors and one run by midwives. And women quickly noticed the difference. They begged not to be put in with the doctors. Why? Because if a doctor delivered your baby, you were 3 times more likely to die than if a midwife delivered your baby. Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis noticed this dichotomy of outcomes, and unlike his colleagues, he didn't dismiss it as happenstance. He was a Hungarian physician who wasn't locked into the ruts of medical convention. He asked why. Why were young women dying under the care of the most educated physicians in Europe? But then, under the care of midwives, they did fairly well. Then came a tragic clue. A colleague of his, a doctor, cut himself during an autopsy, and he developed the same symptoms as the mothers who were dying after childbirth. That was it, Semmelweis thought. These doctors, he noticed, were going from dissecting corpses in the autopsy lab to delivering babies without washing their hands. Though the world didn't know about bacteria at this point, Semmelweis suspected that some infectious agent was being transferred from the corpses to these young mothers and robbing them of their lives. So Semmelweis tried something radical. He made doctors wash their hands with chlorinated lime before delivering babies. And the result? Nothing short of miraculous. Mortality among these young mothers dropped from 18% to 1%. He found the cause and the cure. But yet, in the face of dramatic preservation of life and improvement of medical science, no one wanted to hear it. And Semmelweis didn't tiptoe or tread lightly on his discovery. It wasn't in his personality. He demanded change and refused to play politics. How could he? Lives were on the line. And when the medical establishment refused to listen, he accused them of killing their patients through arrogance and ignorance. And his colleagues? Well, they turned on him. They couldn't accept that they might be the cause of so much suffering. Semmelweis's ideas were mocked, and over time, his career was destroyed. He was dismissed from his post, and women kept dying of bed fever. Over time, this rejection made Semmelweis more desperate and more outspoken. He was frantic. He had discovered a cure that would keep mothers alive and babies out of orphanages, but no one would listen. Per the story, he became erratic and angry. Eventually, his colleagues asked him to come visit a new hospital. Why, Semmelweis thought? Were they offering an olive branch? Were they ready to admit that they were wrong? Maybe. So he agreed as a collegial courtesy. But when he arrived at the new campus, he quickly realized it was a trap. They had taken Semmelweis to an asylum, and he was the patient. Once he realized the deception, he quickly tried to flee. But the guards caught him, beat him, secured him in a straitjacket, and confined him in a darkened cell. He was repeatedly doused with cold water and force-fed castor oil as a laxative. This poor man, with a curious mind and a compassionate heart, who had campaigned for the lives of young mothers, was condemned to torture and inhumane conditions. During the beating, he had sustained an open wound to his right hand, which quickly festered in the squalor of his cell. 2 weeks later, he died of sepsis, the same disease he had devoted his life to stopping. Today, there's a phenomenon named after Dr. Semmelweis. It's called the Semmelweis Reflex, and it's the reflexive rejection of new knowledge. It's very common across all fields of thought. I know I've been guilty of this type of response, and many of you likely have as well. As humans, we instinctively reject ideas that challenge what we already believe. To make sense of the world around us, we create constructs of understanding in our minds. And to tear all that down and rebuild it again is consciously and subconsciously scary. In this story, Dr. Semmelweis was right, but the truth didn't matter because those with power at the time lacked the ability for flexible and courageous thought. He tried to save mothers, and his profession beat him down, tortured him, and killed him for it. Semmelweis' story isn't just history, it's a warning about arrogance, about blind faith and consensus, about forgetting that medicine is supposed to serve the patient, not the profession or a dogmatic scientific religion. So when I say on this show, question everything, it's not to be contrarian or purposefully heretical. It's because history shows us what happens when we stop questioning. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not suggesting you become one either. I just think we should ask questions and go where truth and knowledge take us. And if what you thought was dead wrong turns out to be right, be willing to accept it. If what you thought was right turns out to be dead wrong, allow your mind to change. Be willing to tear down your mental constructs of truth and rebuild them in the most probabilistic form. If you don't do that, you've chosen a tribe of thought over the truth. So be open-minded, be curious, be compassionate, and never let tribalism and dogmatic devotion trump the truth. Cheers.